major talk show. I am major. The word.
I am HO Talk Show. Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
Razor. In the booth in the building one more again. Back like we never left. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we definitely appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. So, good people, right about now, we are joined by a gentleman who started out in Charlottesville, Virginia, and has since traveled the world. And we're going to introduce to some and present to others, none other than Mr. Richard Dickerson. Richard Dickerson is the president of RAD Communications, a business and political consultancy specializing in planning, government relations, community relations, political campaigns, and grassroots lobbying. As I said, a native of Charlottesville, Virginia, Richard is a graduate of Lane High School and West Virginia's Davis Elkins College. And the list goes on and on as well, from being a veteran of the U.S. Army, part of the Virginia Democratic Party, residing and working in Birmingham, Alabama, part of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the USAID. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dickerson. Richard, how you doing, sir? Good to see you again.
Hey man, I'm all good. I'm still black, still vertical, and it's all good.
There you go. So, we are broadcast worldwide, streaming worldwide, right? But folks in our local listening area know your beautiful, wonderful sister, right? She's the one that put us in touch, and she's been telling me for a hot minute, Mr. Render's been like, you have to get my brother on your radio show. Do you not know who my brother is?
My sister is very kind. I love her to death, and she's really good people. She cares, and she's growing into being more like our mom every day, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful blessing.
So, Mr. Richard Dickerson, as we've been saying, a native of Charlottesville, Virginia, and your journey, your path have taken you a lot of places. As I know you and Razor were talking about some of the work that you've been doing, but start us from the beginning, though. I think that's a good start to start, because if you're a graduate of Lane High School, right, and we have many stalwarts that's still holding up, the wall here in Charlottesville, making sure that the young folk do not forget our history here. So just tell us about your beginnings, right, and maybe leading into as you started figuring out what you wanted to get into, when you became a young man, right? When it comes to how politics and activism became so important, how did this start?
This is a very good question. I grew up in Charlottesville. I give, if anything good happens, it's because of my parents. My father was a janitor at UVA Hospital for 44 years. He worked double shifts for 30 years. That means he left home before 7 and got back after 11. And he went to the 3rd grade. Pop could barely read, write his name. He had hard work, discipline, character, went to church. My mom, April 1st, my mother will be dead 45 years. Knew everybody in town, was a housekeeper, maid, but they had fire, consistency, weren't afraid. My parents weren't afraid. Grades 1 to 3 was all black at Jefferson Elementary School. 61 to 63. 64 went up to Johnson Elementary on Cherry Avenue. That's 8. I think it was 8 black children in the school, and 3 of the 8 black were Dickersons, my 2 brothers and I. And man, it was hell. I mean, you don't realize what you're dealing with. But it was, I said to my mother, 2 of the most impressive things in my life probably came out of 64. One morning I was stumbling around, not ready to go to school, and my mother said, "Dick, what's the matter?" And before I could answer, she said, "You're embarrassed about your outfit," because I was in a school play and we didn't have enough money, or didn't have any money, and my mother had made me a costume. And she said, "Let me tell you something. Don't worry about your outfit. You're just as good as anyone. No better. Just take your ass to school." And I'm like, cool. That's through my life. Through my life, it steeled me against the ugly, against the prejudice, against the money, against all of the stuff where people said You didn't belong. You shouldn't be here. Because I had a mother who had the God-given sense to say, you're just as good. And I
Mm,
think it's important today because too often we try make the mistake of thinking buying someone whatever the cool thing is, whether it's shoes or jackets or whatever, makes them. It really doesn't. It
mm,
ain't what you're wearing. So I'm thankful for my parents, the hard work, and fourth grade, first time dealing with white people.
mm.
And that was one of the good things about Charlottesville. We had to deal with white people very early. So I learned about white people.
Yeah.
So when I got to high school, I'd been dealing with white people for years, and so I had some sense. But fourth grade, then fifth grade, we had freedom of choice. There was another school at McGuffey. Sixth grade, they brought all the sixth graders back to Jefferson. Seventh grade, I was at Buford Junior High. So I changed schools every year for 5 years. And I like to read. I was the worst athlete. Like I had my brother Milton, who died 10 years ago. They called him Catfish, was one of the best athletes that Charlottesville ever produced.
Hmm.
First baseman, left-handed pitcher, and just an incredibly gifted point guard.
Hmm.
Way ahead of his time. And I don't say it because he was my brother. I say it because it's fact. But he was really good. My older brother was very good, and I was just awful. I mean, like, when they choose the teams, I'd be like the last person. I'd be sort of a throw on just to fill out the team.
And get the numbers right.
Yeah, keep the numbers right, brother. So, but I like to read. I love to read, and I remember, these things in your life. You look back. I remember being with my grandmother who lived over in Standishville, and I was one day laying out in the grass and looking at an airplane, and she said, "Richard, you just stay in school. One day you'll be able to fly, do anything you want to." And
Mm.
so those things stuck with me. But I love to read, and because reading could take you anywhere.
Mm.
We were the offspring of working poor black people in a segregated city, in a segregated town, and it was hard.
Mm.
And you didn't really know how poor you were until we got integrated in '64 and started going up and seeing those white kids. They got
Mm.
metal lunch boxes and brick houses. I'm like, damn.
Now, Mr. Dixon, let me ask you this question then, to because that's a beautiful picture that you painted of humble beginnings, right? So there's a saying that I'm sure you've heard called that says education is the great equalizer. I heard you mention about diversity or lack thereof, and how when you went into different phases and stages, being from neighborhood you were from, and and seeing the importance of reading. So I'm curious on you think about that, your thoughts on that phrase,
I
right?
think it.
Whether education is the great equalizer.
I think it is. I think it still is, and it probably will be uh, long after I'm gone. I think one of the things that I've done over the years is I've been a volunteer in schools in Alabama, in Richmond, in Atlanta, in Washington D.C. And what strikes me too often, unfortunately, is our children, young black children, can't read. If you can't read, you are in a very difficult place because you can't learn. It makes learning hard. So I think education gets you in the game. When I was younger, much younger, we were told we had to be twice as good as the white kids,
Mhm.
twice as good. And then we still might not get a shot. But if we weren't twice as good, we knew we weren't getting a shot. So there was an effort to be good, and that was across all activities. My brother Milton was just a damn good athlete. The guys and the students, I think, were good students because we knew we weren't going to get but one shot if we were lucky, and so
Hmm.
that kind of guided. And it's one of the challenges and burdens and blessings of being black. You don't get a lot of opportunities, so you rightly or wrongly feel it when I was younger that we got to do right because the people coming behind us got to make it all right for them. We can't mess it up. So this opportunity you get, you got to like knock it out.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about on this show before, y'all. Of that sort of, because I heard what you said, Ms. Dixon, and it's like a hodgepodge. It's like a pot liquor of emotions and feelings of having that weight, that responsibility, but also the reward of maybe being the first in your family to do something, first from your neighborhood to do something, things like that. But that also can create, what they call like a big brother complex, like a savior complex, and you also can get survivor's guilt. Don't forget that part too. Of
I think,
sort of being the one. Like, so how fair is that?
well, life is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is, again, I grew up in segregated Charlottesville, segregated Virginia. People, relatives paying poll taxes, scared to come out on the sidewalk at night because stories about the Klan grabbing people and all of these things. That's the world I grew up in. The world is not fair. And I think one of the challenges in mistakes is we create this illusion that things are going to be easier, better. And I think adults, particularly with parents and grandparents, have made a big mistake with their children in trying to make it so easy. My father said, now this is a janitor with third grade education. He said, boy, your home is every day is not gonna be a bowl of Cheerios. I'm like, well, what's Pop talking about? He said, bowl of cherries, I think. He said, look, you're gonna be good days and bad days, but you got to keep going. And you got to believe, and you got to believe in something. You got to have some character. You got to have some consistency. And I think that's what helped us, me and others of my generation, get through these times. Because when you're walking down the street and somebody pulls up to you and calls you every name but a child of God, you don't know. It's like, oh, you're walking down Barracks Road and somebody pulls a gun, drives up and points a gun at you. You know, we could have easily given up.
I'm glad you said
My
that, sir.
my youngest brother was killed in our home when he was 3 years old. We were sitting around the table on a Sunday evening, and the people upstairs got in a fight. And 1 minute we were talking, we heard a pop, and we were wet. And a bullet came through the ceiling and blew his head off. Now, in those days we didn't have counseling and all the stuff that we have now, and it's such a traumatic thing. But my father, cleaned the walls off. He buried his child, and we keep going. And I think the strength of our people, Black people, is our innate ability to keep going. I recently had the good fortune to visit the slave castles in Ghana, and it brought me to my knees.
I bet.
Brought me to my knees. The absolute inhumanity in the evil that our people suffered. But through it all, we still here.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Yes.
With everything that you said, and you talked about your generation, what is your take on integration?
We're going to be here for about a couple of weeks. I think it's a mixed blessing.
Okay.
I think it's done enormous harm in many respects to our community, our institutions, our neighborhoods. I think in many instances it hurt Black people in that we assigned more value to that was white than it deserved. Their water is not colder.
Right.
They're not stronger. They're not faster. One of the things that I've learned, and I've been out here, I'm 3 months shy of 71. I've been out here a long time. And and some of the most incompetent people I've ever met are white. And they get positions, they fail repeatedly, and they still get the opportunities. And we don't do that. We don't get it. And I've seen it across every area. Everywhere I've gone, I've seen it.
So I have a question about that, but first I want to go back to something real quick. How old were you when the tragedy happened with your younger brother?
I was 5.
You only 5. Wow.
I was sitting right across from him.
Wow.
Can I jump in, Charles,
Yes,
before we
please.
shift? Welcome to the show, Mr. Dickerson. I'm just kind of consuming everything that you're saying here. It's 2 things that I want to get your reflections on. With all of the challenges that you said that you experienced growing up here, right here in Charlottesville, you and your family experienced. And then I hear you talk about the strength, tenacity, perseverance of your parents to get not just you, but your siblings, your sister, whoever, and themselves through that turmoil, and to go on to be able to live like a thriving life. My question to you, because that could have went either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it happens. It either swallows people up, those situations swallow people up, or, they come out on the other end and they go off to experience the world and have all of these successes such as yourself. And there are some people who say that, systems rigged, decks stacked too much against us, and we don't have that access. And is it your belief that all of us have that access with the right attitude, momentum, perseverance, and
No.
what things are necessary in order to be able to come out on the other end of those things? Is the family dynamic, do you feel that was key in your situation? And so, if an individual lacks that, does that change, the odds?
I think, it's all individual. I think family really helps. I think having 2 parents really helps. We didn't have any money. We had discipline. We had hard work. My father, he worked 6 days a week. We saw hard work. We knew what hard work was. So that was ingrained into us. You got to get a job. You got to work. You got to do better. You don't want to come to this hospital. You got to stay in school. So that was part of the mantra. We couldn't give up. I mean, I, this is a story probably my sister was, if I got a B, or maybe less than a B, because there were a lot of less than Bs, if I were to be honest. I would tear up. I almost start crying because I didn't want to be getting. You want to do good. You want to do good, man. And part of wanting to do good for me was for my parents. I saw how hard they worked. So I mean it. If anything good in my life, it's my parents, because they consciously and unconsciously, I saw them and I know what they went through. And in the later years of my father's life before he died, and I used to be with him at the rehab hospital, and he'd tell me stories about being a janitor and how the doctors and the people would walk through the floor just because they could.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank
nobody, you're just a janitor, you're just a nigga.
you. And
You
I
know,
know that may have seemed like a redundant question, but we have so many young people out here who say, like, why try? Like, this is it for me. There's no more for me. Look at my life, And so I just wanted to, for the listening audience and for those who were thinking along those lines, I just wanted to get your response to that. The other thing I had, and I'm a words person, I was playing back something you said early on in this conversation, and it was that you learned white people. And
yeah.
of course there's books written about us, or people learn about us, there's books written about them, we learn about them, but like, you're the first individual, so to speak, where they explicitly said, I learned about them. And to learn something means to understand it, separate their actions. You learned about them. Is there a deeper level to that?
I I think there is, but if I might, just 1 second, for the young people out there who, you're lost or you don't know where to go, you want to give up. I would say that's a big world out there.
Mhm.
It's a big, beautiful world out there. Experience it. Go see it. Go to the beach. Go to the mountains. God's beauty and grace and splendor. It's all over.
Mm.
But don't limit yourself. Now, if you limit yourself, that's what happens. You can feel okay. I'm closed in, but you gotta apply yourself. You
Mhm.
can't be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid to fall. If you fall down, you get up. You fall down 3 times, you get up 5 times. So
Mm.
on that score, learning white people, I think learn white people because you just being around them.
Mm.
I was 12 years old. My first job, I think I was 12, and I cleaned the landlord's house where we lived, where my younger brother was killed. And I cleaned her house every other Saturday, it seems to me. And I think I was paid 11.75 or 12.25. And she wrote a check. And I'm thinking, what kind of shit is this? Check. I ain't got no damn checking account. I mean, this kind of bullshit. You know, but you learn them. It's the whole thing with dogs. I'm sure maybe you guys have dogs. You don't. I don't have a dog, but the way they gave more affection to dogs
Mm.
than they treated black people, I
Yeah,
saw it.
facts.
I saw it. And I'm not reading in no book. I saw it when I cleaned the house. How she treated the dog. How she treated me. I saw it. I saw it. These things that you never forget. The
Yeah,
dog ate
that's
something,
your memory.
and the dog ate it. She said, "Dog didn't finish." She said, "Richard, do you want this?" I mean, what?
Mm.
How do you?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Now, Mr. Dickerson, so you,
Hey,
if I
Charles.
heard one thing
Charles, hold
consistently, Razor got something for you.
Yeah, he said something. Max, you'll know where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
When you went through that situation, if somebody was to ask you, how do we get past this? How do we not dwell on the fact that she treated the dog better than you? What would your answer be?
I don't think you get. Well, first of all, you don't get past it. See, you're just there, but you got to keep living.
Hmm.
The thing is, when you're a 71-year-old loud black man, you've had more than your share of ugly directed to you. I can tell you. I've
True.
lived in Birmingham. I've lived in Atlanta. I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived outside of out of New York City. I was in the Army. I've worked in 15, 17 countries, 25 other states. So I've had my share of ugly, but there's a bigger goal. You got it, you got a
Mhm.
job, you got a contract. So you can't fall for the okie doke. And too
Mm.
often we fall for the okie doke because we get angry. And we get angry, we exploit, we show it in a way that hurts us. And I want to say this is so really, I think it's important. We are the only race of people in the world who've been denied the right to be angry.
Mm.
Hmm.
Because if we get angry, we're immediately called an angry black man, an angry
Mhm.
black woman. We're labeled and we are SOL. Nobody wants
Mm.
to talk to you. Black people don't want to talk to you. White people sure not going to talk to you because he's angry.
Yeah.
So think about that. All of the
True. True.
indignities, the ugly, the discrimination that we have suffered and we continue to suffer, we are denied the right to be angry.
Mm. Now, how do you have a balanced conversation about that with the next generation, though? And I'm saying this as a black man who is a black father. And
I
Max
think
and Troy have heard me bring this up before, whereas we have to talk to our children about things that other cultures have the liberty not to ever discuss.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
but how do you feel that we go about that
Tell
without
them the truth. I think
without making them, automatically discriminatory or making them racist because because you got to have these conversations about how life, you said life isn't fair for them.
I think and I really, I've got some nephews. I try to talk to them a little bit. They think I'm crazy, but I think one, you have to tell them the truth, and I
Mhm.
think we have erred amazingly because we haven't told the truth. We got to tell our young people the truth. This is what this world is. Racism is in the DNA of this country.
Mhm.
You're not going to, and your zip code don't mean a damn.
Mhm.
And where we are right now, let's be really clear. If the democracy fails, I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what your zip code is. It won't mean a spit.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's why it's important. That's why we have to be a part of it. That's why young people have to see that it's bigger than them, bigger
Right.
than them, it's bigger than all of us. We
Mhm.
stand on shoulders of giants. And our young people have to understand that they are the offspring of kings and queens.
Mhm.
And we don't teach them that. They don't understand it. We got to tell them that.
Mhm.
Way before whatever they're doing in Europe, they've done it in Africa.
That's right. That's right.
Okay?
Let me challenge
Okay.
you a bit, sir. Let me challenge you a bit.
Yeah.
Earlier, you said that education was the great equalizer.
Hmm.
Why, in this day, this year of 2026, racism still and prejudices, bigotry, like you right, like all that's kind of lumped together. Like that seems to be the most powerful thing in the world. Like we thought we had progress, right? First black president, all that kind of stuff, and then we're back here to where majority of the country apparently votes for, someone who's sexist, homophobic, prejudiced, bigot. List goes on and on and on. But he was voted in. Like
But
is education really the great equalizer because it hasn't
sure it is,
doesn't work?
because look who voted for him. Look who
Okay.
voted for him. I mean, ignorance and racism, what this shows, ignorance and racism trumped.
Mm.
If you got, people who had college degrees largely, Trump says himself, I want dumb people. I like dumb people
Mm-hmm.
because they'll believe anything. There are no, there are no guarantees in this thing, this game of life.
Mm-hmm.
But education gets you in it. It helps you have a better understanding of it. So when someone says, I got a big, beautiful bill, then maybe you have to read or get someone to help you know where to read or something reputable. So when you look inside of that big, beautiful bill, you see what it's doing to people who look like you.
Mm.
That's what education is not just about getting a job. Education is about helping you understand you, me, others, this big world that we live in. And I think we've got to help our children understand. Yeah, you go to college, go to school, great, but you can't. And I think we make a mistake in that. And that's part of the challenge. We make a mistake because it's all about a job. Yeah, you got to have a job. But if you get a job, make all the money in the world, and you got enough sense to come in out of the rain, or you don't vote, or it don't matter.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's just my thought. What do I
Yeah.
know?
No, no. Yeah, you have a lot of experience. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Richard Dickerson, Charlottesville native. And he is the president of RAD Communications, and he's been a lot of things. And one thing that you have been is involved in like branches of government. So we're curious to know about, from like what got you started in that, and from there to where we are today, right?
Yes.
Because I have to imagine that when you started, you wanted to put us on a trajectory, right? Especially, particularly as Black people and our representation within these branches to try to make it better for future generations. Like, so where does your mind go, right? When you think of when you first started to where you see, like the state of government today?
That's really an excellent question. 1978, I was finishing college as a political science history major, Davis Elkins College, and my advisor came to me and she said, Rich, there's a job announcement on the board. I think you should look at it. And a guy was running for the United States Senate in Virginia, and he was hiring a staff. So I called him, went back and forth, and I got hired. And I was a outreach guy down in Portsmouth, Norfolk area. It was an 8 candidate field. I think we finished fourth, lost miserably. I was broke, which when I was too proud to go home, so I joined the army.
Mm.
Spent 3 years in the Army. In 1981, Chuck Robb, the son-in-law of Lyndon Johnson, was the lieutenant governor. He was running for governor. I wrote him a letter, the campaign a letter. I said, I want to be a part of the campaign. I know all about black voters in Virginia.
Hmm.
And they wrote me back. I couldn't believe it. They said, call us when you get home. I called them. At that time, I was hired. I were in what was the 4th Congressional District, which was Portsmouth. It was 42% black, I think.
Hmm.
We won that district, and somebody can correct me, but I think we won that district by about 30,000 votes, maybe. We won the state by 100,000, so 30% of the statewide victory total came out of my district.
Okay.
David Doak was the campaign manager. Uh, in November, right after Thanksgiving, he called me and he said, Richard, um, would you like to work for the governor? And I'm like, would I like to work for the governor? God damn.
It's ice cold.
Yeah. And so I was appointed as a special assistant policy for Chuck Robb as governor of Virginia. He was the first Democratic governor elected in 16 years.
Hmm.
Uh, in the office at that time, I shared an office with two guys. And this one guy was Philip Abraham, one of the smartest people I ever met. Phil's father was chairman, I think, of the government department at UVA.
Okay.
Okay. The other guy was Jordan Goldman. Jordan went to Georgetown, University of Chicago, and his wife's family had one of the largest, were owners of one of the largest furniture stores in Virginia. And then there was Richard Dickerson, Janitor's son.
Bring it up to Rick.
I mean, and so I worked for Rob, uh, left Rob, I worked for Dukakis, did some work for Jesse Jackson. I worked for Clinton in 92. I did a bunch of local races, did work for the Democratic Party. So I've been all over the country. In each race, we have just like we have a cadre of black consultants. Everybody's like, you get some name, some recognition. People, you try to help each other out, get a job. After the Clinton race in 92, I thought I was going into the administration. I worked for the inaugural committee. That was a whole nother story. I could tell you lots of stories. Um, but I didn't get a job. I ended up going to Macedonia, where I worked as a organizer, civic engagement. Wonderful experience. Learned a lot. Came back from Macedonia, and I wanted to go to law school at UVA. I called John Castine, the former president who died last year, who was a very, very decent and honorable man. He was my friend. He was a very good and decent man. And I called John and I said, John, got through to him. You can't never get through to the president on the first freaking call. So I spoke to two or three different people. Then John finally came to the phone. These are the things you remember all your life. And he says,
Mhm.
Richard, is that you? I said, yeah, John, and I'm paying for this damn call. So he says, well, what is it? I said, well, John, I want to go to law school. He says, but you're in Macedonia. I said, yeah, but I'm coming home. So said, when you're coming home? I said, next week. I said, but I've got some problems. He said, well, what is that? I said, well, I don't have any money.
Mm. Right.
He said, well, we can work with you. I said, well, I got a couple other problems. He said, what else is it? I said, well, I'm a resident of D.C. now, so that the resident stuff makes it more difficult to get in.
Out of state.
Yeah, out of state. And then he said, is there anything else? So this is 1994. And I said, well, yeah, John, I took the LSATs in 1976. He says, come home and, got me a interview with the dean of the law school. And I was really hot on it. It went well. And the next day I was offered a job with the Olympic Committee in Atlanta. So instead of trying to become a lawyer or law school, I went to Atlanta. I worked for the Olympic Committee, which was amazing, just the most wonderful experience. I got to, see opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies. I sat 5 feet away from the dream team, watching drink Budweiser beer. Um, but that was fun. Then after that, I went to New Jersey. I was the chief of staff for the mayor in East Orange, predominantly like a 98% black majority city, which was that was a wild experience. Just a wild experience. But I learned so every job I've learned so much. I came back from New Jersey and I was appointed political appointee at EPA through the White House, the presidential appointee, senior political at Environmental Protection Agency. Then I went to Department of Energy as a deputy assistant secretary, which is sort of it's a big deal for a black kid from Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a huge deal, and and so each job prepared me for the next job.
Right, right.
And each job you meet people and you develop relations, and people think that you sort of know what you're doing or believe it. And then, so I after Clinton, I moved to Birmingham, Alabama. I won't say anything ugly about Birmingham, but I won't say anything nice about it. Uh, I spent 20 years there doing consulting work. Uh, Very difficult city for me. I was pained at what I thought the backwardness and the fearful. I thought the black people there would be a lot stronger. Coming from Atlanta and Washington D.C., where black people were strong, or at least were willing would give the image of strong. I was very disappointed. People were docile, scared to look white people in the face, and so willing to accept anything. And I'm like, nah.
And this was late 90s?
Yeah, this is 2001.
Oh man, you gonna have some Birmingham listeners mad at you. They may be mad at us too.
Ask me if I care. But I think Birmingham was tough. Got married there, got divorced there. While there, I went to Afghanistan for a little over a year with USAID. I spent a year in Kandahar, flying around on helicopters every day. Incredible experience. Incredible.
Now, speaking of which, you had a piece called "Is Lack of Diversity a Factor in Our Failure of Afghanistan?" But let's broaden it a little bit though, because recently there's been talk about, and there's actually a one who has a position in the military who said he would not recommend black people to join the military right now. I don't know if you saw that in this.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It's a very tough thing when the commander in chief says he doesn't want to stand next to a black officer.
Right.
This is what Trump's, the Secretary of the Army, the chief of staff for HEDSAF said that HEDSAF blocked 4 appointments because Trump don't want to stand next to black people or a woman. That's as damning as that comment is. What's more damning is that we live in a country that elected that person, and we've had too many people who heard that comment and remained silent. That's more damning to me.
Yeah.
Bonhoeffer, a German theologian, said many years ago, he was hung by the Nazis, and it rings true. He says, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. So we've got so much evil in our world now. And for whatever the reason, the institutions, people are afraid. This country's being run like a mob. If you do anything, they whack you. College presidents used to be voices of leadership and morality and character. There's nothing there. Our religious leaders, both black and white, they too often have succumbed to this pressure and they do nothing.
So based on all that you've shared just now, what would you say is the biggest threat to the black man?
Wow. Biggest threat to the black man. That is, if I'm think for a second, I think the biggest threat to black man is I think, and this is, I'm probably going to offend some black people, but I think the biggest threat to the black man is going to be the black man himself, because we have got to realize our strength. We cannot succumb to any of the bullshit. The biggest threat to us is us. There are a lot more of us if we do right, if we participate, if we stay in this, if we raise our children, and I'm not talking about perfect. I'm 71 years old. I done all kinds of shit. So I ain't trying to act something I'm perfect. I'm just telling you, we gotta be willing to do the hard stuff for right versus the easy stuff that's wrong. We have to do. We have to do that. And so I think, yeah, racism is horrible, but it is 2026, and we've lived through slavery, castrations, hangings, beatings, and burnings. So racism is bad, but we got to be right with us. We got to stick together. We got to be more willing to
Right.
help one another.
That's right.
Can't be afraid. I've seen it so many times. Black people scared to hire black people.
Mm.
Man, I've had people, nah, man. No, man, you one of them outspoken brothers.
Right.
You know, I mean, no, man. No, man, we mess with you. And so,
Sound right.
and, if you hire somebody and they don't pan out, have you hired another white who didn't pan out?
Mm.
Let's not have the standard so much that we don't give us another chance. If we don't give us another chance, who's going to give us a chance?
I got you. And I think Razor has a question or comment for you.
Mr. Dixon, as strong as you are, when you said you thought that there would be stronger down south, what's it like to see a defeated black man in the numbers that you were looking at it at?
Wow, man, that is like $1 million. It is it's a horrible thing, because I went there to get, because I was caught up in I'm a history major. I know the story of the 16th Street Church and the bombings and I'm thinking these people are going to be some bad motherfuckers.
Mm-hmm.
No, they were not. And so what it forced me to do, I think consciously and subconsciously, was to try to be stronger.
Right.
Because I did not want to be like what I saw.
Yeah.
And so you can maybe even overreact to that. It's like, no, man, I ain't gonna do that. So when instead of being like driving 8 miles, going at 8, you're at 10 all the time, because you're scared to just backslide, because you don't want to be a stumbling, bumbling, shuffling Negro.
Yep.
That's spot on. And it's even a microcosm around here, right? If you think about it, like we have some very traditional rural areas right around sort of urban Charlottesville, and a lot of folks come to Charlottesville, like for that reason, because it looks so progressive, right, from the outside. And when you're on the inside, though, it may feel different and look different, but on the outside looking in, it has a different perspective.
There are, where all the good white people, and I'm just gonna. All the good white people are good white people up until a point. If you disagree with them, that becomes a point. Long as you agree. And the other thing, let's be really clear. This Trump stuff would never have happened if the good white people had not taken a pass on the racism that they see every day. Okay?
Pretty spot on.
Their family, their friends, their neighbors, the people they work with. They didn't call them out because they didn't want to. People want to be liked. Leadership is not about being liked.
Right. And that is true to a very large extent. But that's where I also have to shout out, our sisters, because the only demographic where there was an increase in voters for Harris is Black women. Everybody else had a decline.
Black women, they're saviors of our community.
That's right.
And 98% of Black women voted for Harris. They got them. They turned out. They voted. And 300 a month ago, over 300,000 Black women had lost their jobs under Trump. Over 300,000. Numbers are rising. That's no accident. That's no accident. This
Right.
assault on the federal government, because people say the federal government has been the vehicle which Black people have used to gain some level of economic stability. So you get the husband is a GS9, the wife is a 12 or 13. Then the husband gets a part-time hustle on the side where he's doing landscaping or painting. They buy a house outside of DC. They get a little boat, and they're living a good life. Kids can go to college and got a little something in the bank. People don't want. This was a direct assault on that.
Yeah. Spot on. And
Okay?
one other thing that I had in mind for you that came up recently too is in regards to the Democratic Party. I don't know if you heard this. This is something that's been hot on the press recently. And it's been a conversation that I've had before, and I'm sure others have had as well. When we look at the history of like systematic discrimination and racism, as well as that being socially, of things like which party like wanted to emancipate slaves, what party had the backing of the KKK and things like that. So there's been talk here recently, in particular, about how, and it's come up before, how Democrats are the party that have always held Black people back. Now, I want your take on it, but my personal opinion is that if you stop the story right there, then you're leaving out a very, very crucial and important part on how representation has shifted over the history of the country. And if we're honest about it, then we, we'll pay attention to that part of seeing how folks who the political party that they align with change based on once Black folks started progressing more within this country and started getting their rights, standing up for their civil liberties and all that kind of stuff. And then we see a political shift. But there's some folks who want to leave this at Democrats were the ones who wanted slavery. Democrats started the KKK and things like that. So when you hear those kind of conversations, I want to know what your take is.
I think it's a lot of bullshit. And when Martin King was arrested and sent to prison, 60, he went to the Jessup Mountain, some horrible prison down in Georgia. Were taking him there. Daddy King called Nixon. Nixon didn't call him back. He called Bobby Kennedy. The Kennedys got engaged. That's what's in the modern swinging Black people to Democrats. And so, Robert Byrd, Democratic senator from West Virginia for 40 some odd years, was in the KKK. Yes, he was. When he got in the Senate, he did good things. We are in 2026. The person who's decimated the Department of Education, who's led the charge to put white nationalists in the White House. These are these people. So the KKK of 1952, we're in 2026.
Right.
2026. So let's get it straight. Yeah, first of all, neither party has a monopoly on racism.
Facts.
Okay, let's just get that straight. Democrats have done some terrible things. They've taken Black folks for granted. Yes, they have. I've been out here. I ran around all the country, all over, trying to get Black people to vote. Follow the money. Under Obama, The Alphabet Soup organization spent $500 million. That's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Democratic Senatorial Committee, Democratic National Committee, all the Alphabet Soups. Black consultants, red consultants, brown consultants, yellow consultants, all of us together got 3% of the money. 3%.
Right.
Okay? But they want 90% of our vote, 60% turnout, but we can't get in the money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like you said earlier, like we are our biggest threat to Max's question.
Yeah. So, but
because all that would be null and void, right? If we were to stand,
we got to be willing to demand
right
votes and investment. What y'all getting? What do we get for this investment?
Yeah.
You know, and heretofore, when I was, younger, black people used to have the franchise on black vote. We were the ones who were in charge of West Philly and the urban communities. Nowadays, that's taken. Too often, you got young, white kid with that laptop. They don't know black people.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Dickerson. Do you think in the next 10, 15 years that the Hispanic community will surpass the black community?
They already have.
Okay.
Okay, that's gone. Hispanic communities have surpassed it. And let me say this to the Hispanic community, and I don't give a rat's ass. There's so many Hispanic community who don't want to be associated with the Democratic Party because they see the Democratic Party as being the black party with black people. And they don't want to be with black people, so they voted for the Republicans. Republicans kicked them in their ass. Because that's what they did. Mm-hmm. You see all these people on TV. I voted for Trump, and I got deported. Good.
Mm-hmm. Hey,
got what you wanted.
He said, "I'm going to be the retribution." Now, how do you win with that?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Let me ask you your prediction. The next time the United States sees a minority president,
I'll be long gone.
What ethnicity do you think they'll be?
Like the sex scale? Is it just ethnicity or just gender?
We can do gender too.
Okay.
These are your predictions.
I think we're going to see it would be someone Hispanic.
Okay.
I believe it. I we had a black president. And the ugly about that is America said, y'all had a black guy, and our response to that is find the dumbest, most incompetent, most despicable white person, and we're going to make them president.
Yep.
We respond to your greatness with this,
by trashing the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Dickerson, if let's just say, for instance, by the statement you just made about how the Hispanic community in large feels about the African American community. So if a Hispanic president comes to be, what do you think happens to us at that point?
We're gonna, I have a crystal ball. Look at have to see what the numbers are. As our numbers grow, our Hispanic numbers are growing off the chart, even with these deportations. And I'll answer and say, all of this is about the numbers. But white people are dying. They're not having babies. Hispanics are growing by leaps and bounds. They see the numbers. At the end of the day, it's about numbers. This country will be a majority minority country. People don't like it. So what do? You make it more difficult for people to vote, make it more difficult to get education, make it easier to lock people up, because all those things disenfranchise people. So that's what's happening. And back to your question about the Hispanic president, I think, can we form a coalition? What do we do? We got to be stronger, smarter. Democracy's not free. We got to be willing to spend money. People spend money on what they want. People ain't about, I ain't getting no money in no politician. Mm-hmm. Right, damn it, you want your streets paved? You want a park in your neighborhood? None of this stuff is free.
Right.
So you got to support someone, and no one's going to be with you 100%, but somebody's going to be with you at least give you something.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dickerson.
Hey. Thank y'all. Thank y'all, man.
Did you get it all off your chest? Did we not cover anything that you wanted to talk about? That was a
I
great
guess.
conversation. We covered a lot of ground, if you ask me.
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think what I would say is that, in closing, if I might, that
Mm-hmm.
I have faith,
Mm,
and I tell you, what, some days my faith gets shaken,
Mm-hmm.
and but I got a call a couple of days ago, and a friend of mine who I'd not seen in 4 or 5 years said, "Yeah, I just thought of, your name, and I see your comments on LinkedIn." He said, "I just want you to know that I appreciate you, and you keep being strong."
mm,
And look, it's way past halftime for me. Okay, I don't coop much. It's way past halftime. I'm almost 71, but I want to fight this fight for my nephews, all these down the road. So my faith wavers. I'm not gonna lie, it wavers, but I'm just not pray that I don't give up.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was thinking about that as you were talking just a short while ago, because you're obviously very vocal and passionate about your people, and addressing the disenfranchisement that we all deal with. But like you said, 71 years old, you get tired. Strength comes at a
yes,
cost, and to think about
yes,
having to
Mm.
fight that fight all your life. And I'm
yes,
looking at Charles. I was looking at you. I was looking at Charles. I was looking at Razor. And then we had the conversation about Black women in leadership and how they're helping to pave the way as well. And I'm thinking about us, and it's not fair. It's a sad story. It's a sad story.
Yeah, and I totally get what you're saying about life isn't fair, but
yeah,
at the same time, it's do we deserve to always have to be resilient though? Right?
Mm.
It's like at some
Mm.
point, we shall overcome should come true.
Yeah.
Like instead of it being like, well, we've been through it before, we can go through it again. Like at some point, like I just pray and hope and wish, you know what I mean, like that we will find our strength and recognize our strength to be able to stay above that.
And Mr. Dixon, I want to thank you before we get off because while you were talking, I owned a barbershop for many, many years. And there was a point where I had like just closed my eyes and I was literally taken back to some of the older guys who I didn't have coming up as a kid that would come up into the barbershop. And you had a inclination of who this man was until he started talking. And then he started telling you what not only he had survived, but literally a roadmap for us to look out for so that we didn't
yep,
have to go through the same atrocities.
yes,
So I even had my head down because it took me back so far that I was starting to have an emotional reaction to it because I think about the old guys when I couldn't appreciate it, when they were saying, man, it's a shame that my grandson is fighting the same fight that I had to fight.
Right.
yeah,
So
yes,
when I'm hearing you talk and you're talking about you're 71 years young, I'm thinking about, will I be in a condition where even if nobody is listening to me, I can give out this type of information at the strength that you're giving it out? Because if it affects one, then maybe the fight continues.
but that impacts one directly impacts all indirectly. That's what King said. He was right. But in close, I just want to say, y'all, thank y'all. You know, I'm a Charlottesville guy from Ridge Street. I go all over. I'm a Ridge Street guy. I will always be a Ridge Street guy. And I think that we want to tell the story. And I mentioned my brother Milton so much because I love him so much. And one of the things my brother Milton always said to me, and I take it with me when I leave here, he said, "Richard, you always stay the same. Okay, stay the same. You all right?" And Frankie Swift from right on Ridge Street, we in first grade together. He said, "Dickie, you always the same." So that to me means more than any of this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I try to. I'm a Ridge Street guy, and I've tried to stay the same. I've tried to keep the values that my parents instilled in me, and I've tried to do right by it. And I've tried as I get older to try to be right by it for myself, but for my parents, because I can't tell you all or explain to you how much love and respect I have for my parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we can feel it. We feel it though.
Okay.
Sir, well, sir,
Thank you.
many thanks, much thanks to you.
Thank you.
Hope it's not the last time, and we hope to see you around town. You know, definitely stop by, give us a holler when you're in town as well.
I would love to do that. I get with my sister. I'd love to get together with you all. We'll have lunch or get something to eat one night for dinner if your schedule will allow that. And I'd love to try to get that done sooner than later.
I'll
Sounds
take
great.
you up on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Razor don't miss a meal now.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thanks for standing on the wall.
All right. Thank y'all. Y'all
Take
be
care.
well. Okay. Bye bye.